If you're confused how you can run for longer without getting tired, well, then this video is for you. My name is Caroline, and I used to hate running. Fast forward 10 years, I'm now aiming for the Olympics, and I'm running about 85 miles per week at some point. In this video, I'm going to break down how you can run for longer, but without actually getting tired, because that doesn't make sense, right? Tip number 1 is going to be to decrease intensity. And I want you to really think about this, because I know it sounds obvious, right? We just run slower, then we can run for longer. However, what I didn't get, at least when I was younger, was I didn't get how it was actually making me faster. So to give a little bit of background of my story, I used to have a running test in high school every year or so. And I was very much dreading this running test. I hated running. And it was because I was dreading that feeling of being really exhausted. 2 weeks before the test, I would run as fast as possible. I didn't understand how slowing down was actually doing anything. I didn't understand this easy running. Even when I was watching YouTube videos at a later point, when I was researching more about running, I thought that you ran slower because you shouldn't feel bad about running slower. I thought it was a mental thing. I didn't think you would actually get better by slowing down. And I don't know if this is the case for you, but truly, when I say that it's not just a mental game, although it is important to run at a slower pace so that mentally you're able to, sustain all the training, it's also super important from a physiological point of view. You want to be able to practice your fat utilization during your easy runs. You want to build that aerobic base. You want to recover from your harder runs. And you want to be able to run for longer so that come race day, you can combine your faster workouts, your threshold runs, your tempo runs, your VO2 max efforts, or your speed sessions with those longer durations. This is especially true if you're aiming to compete at the 5K, the 10K, a half marathon or a marathon. So I really want you to not only look at this running slower to be able to run longer as something that is, how can you actually finish that longer distance, but I want you to really believe that slowing down is going to help your race performance and build your endurance. Because when you believe it, that's when you're actually going to stay consistent with it. And that's when you are going to see those results. My next tip is also going to sound obvious, and that is to increase mileage gradually. And I want you to understand why this is so important, because if you're anything like me, if you don't really understand why, then you're just going to keep making this mistake again and again and again. So again, to give some context on how I was making this mistake, I started off running my first 10K and I felt so good. And I remember the next time I went out to run, I went for 11K. And I was like, oh my God, I did the 11K. And then the next time I did 12K and 13K and 14K. And I just kept on going, increasing more and more and more until at one point it just got too much. And that's what we want to avoid. We want to kind of think of it as outsmarting our body, where, for example, say you're running 40 kilometers per week. Say you have one run at 10 kilometers, you have one at 15, so then we're at 25, and then you have one at 7 and one at 8, so 2 shorter runs. And then how we go about then increasing gradually is, say, 10% of that, which is a rule of thumb, that you don't want to increase by more than 10%, is going to be 4 kilometers. So say, to be safe, you increase by 3 kilometers. So say we add those 3 kilometers to your long run. So your long run, say, will now be at 18 instead of 15 kilometers. And then what we want to do is that we do that 1 week, but then the next week, we want to go back to doing the 15 kilometer long run instead of just keep progressing. nothing like I was doing when I didn't know anything about running. Because what we do then is that we see how is the body feeling when we then go back. Is that 15 kilometers now feeling much easier than it did before? And it's kind of like, am I only doing 15? I did 18 last week. Then that's a really good state to be in, because that means that the next week we can go back to 18 and then we can keep on progressing. And this is really the logic I use when I am coaching my athletes, but I use this not just with the long run. I use this as far as building the threshold runs, the tempo runs. I use this as far as building the long run and the total mileage in general. But it's just a really smart way of increasing mileage and intensity without it actually feeling harder. And the third and final tip is going to be to add tempo sessions, threshold sessions, and or speed sessions. And I'm saying this at last because most of you guys already know this, and most of you start off by doing this and think that this is the end all be all to running faster. And it definitely is really important, and a common misconception or myth about heart rate training is that it means that you're always running easy. And that's definitely not the case, because we want to increase the time at which you are running at threshold to be able to sustain running at a faster pace on race day. That is just as important as running your easy runs easy. So when I talk about the importance of easy running, I am never saying that you should not have these faster sessions. I'm just saying that you need the easy runs in addition to your faster sessions, and you need that variety in your training. But when I talk about adding tempo sessions or threshold sessions or VO2 max sessions or speed sessions, which if you want, I can do a whole video on what the difference is and when to do what. When I'm talking about doing these sessions, I also do recommend doing them on heart rate, not on paces. And this is for the same reason as with your easy runs, that heart rate is just a different way of measuring your effort. And what, again, I really like about heart rate is that it is specific to you, which at least to me makes so much more sense than these arbitrary paces that are based on these, old PRs or some other data where it might be what we want to be running, but it might not actually be where we're at. Basically, what we want to do is that we want to figure out what heart rate is your lactate threshold at? And then we want to be doing a lot of training in that heart rate range. And what you can do is you can start off with a little bit lower heart rate than that, just to really make sure you're absorbing the training. And then as that feels good, you can have some weeks when you're having hard training weeks that are, closer to that lactate threshold. But what I would instead really recommend is just focusing on the volume at threshold, because at the end of the day, especially if you're racing something like a half marathon or a full marathon, you are out there for a long time and you want to be really training your body to be efficient at that threshold effort. And another great benefit to having these threshold runs or tempo runs or these faster runs is that it's going to make your easy runs feel super slow. That comparison, that's awesome. That's going to make running further for your long runs feel easier, which is what this video is all about. I'm also a running coach, so if you're looking for a coach and for one-on-one coaching, then make sure to fill out my form below. And then I also have some really exciting news to share with you guys about my startup. So if you didn't know, I'm a founder and entrepreneur. My company has been Protein Muffins, but right now we are pivoting more to be a complete wellness brand, and we're thinking about launching recipe ebooks and strength training programs, and then a bunch of other training plans. So if you're excited about any of this, then let me know in the comments, because I'm hoping that you'll like it. If you're ramping up your mileage and you want to make sure that you stay injury-free, then make sure to check out my video that I'll link here that is all about how to stay injury-free. Thank you so much for watching.